Alright guys, I was originally gonna do a video. I was gonna show you guys I was gonna put a new fuel pressure sensor in, but apparently I need an adapter here. This guy doesn't screw in, so either I bought the wrong one or I need an adapter. I even bought an extension plug for it, but anyway, so I figure I was gonna do a video and I'll just go through and I'll tell you guys what all I've done to this here truck. Originally I bought this truck. I literally just saw it on the side of the road. I like S10s and it's all straight. So I asked about it and it hadn't run in over 10 years. And the owner was having it towed that day. And Pick and Pull was going to come pick it up and give him $200. And so I was like, man, I'll give you $200 for it. You know, I had an Iron Duke. I got it, replaced the freeze plug in it, put a new battery in it, and I drove it for like 6 months. In that time, I had picked up a 5.3 liter LM7 and had planned on doing a swap. So I kind of beat up on the motor. I ended up, there was another freeze plug. There's a freeze plug on the back of the block in between the motor and the trans that had blown, and I was losing water. And because I already had another motor, I just kind of kept driving it. And I destroyed that engine. But so anyway, I picked up a 5.3 liter LM7 out of a '02 Tahoe, and then I put a sloppy stage 2 cam, which is a Elgin E1840P. It's a fairly aggressive cam. It's a 228 intake, 230 exhaust, 73-degree overlap with a lobe separation of 112. It's pretty good. It's got that nice chop, you know what I mean? But so I'm sacrificing a little bit of low end for high end power. This little truck doesn't weigh nothing for this motor, so I can sacrifice tons of low end. You know, it does not matter at all. So I pulled the motor, pulled the tranny out, and then I had to modify the K member, which is like the cross member, but it's part of the frame on the front. I had to do that because I didn't want to buy a new oil pan. I know I could have got the Holley, or what is it, the muscle car pan, or the Holley 302-2, I believe is what it is, shallower oil pan, but I didn't want to do that. So I notched out the K member, and then because I took so much metal out, I kept having to notch more and more out, put the motor in. I'm like, still not enough, you know. I took a lot out, so I ended up welding in some flat stock underneath, and then some angle iron. Like, I beefed it up pretty good. I was kind of concerned a little bit about it. I didn't, I went a little bit crazy on the reinforcing, but eventually this thing's going to be coming off the ground, eventually. But so anyway, I had to modify and reinforce the K member. Anybody that's going to put an LS in an S10, you're either going to need a new oil pan or you're going to have to notch the K member. And if you're going to do it, take a lot out. It's quite a bit. If next time I do this, I'm just getting the pan because it was a pain in the ass. So after I notched the pan out, beat back the firewall a lot, like a lot. I got videos of this, so I kept having to beat it back and put the motor in, and still not enough. So I wailed on it, beat it back, beat back the firewall, relocated the radiator into the core support. That was probably the easiest thing of all the different things I've done on this truck. I had to cut a couple little tabs out, put it in there. I cut out right here for the fill neck. Yeah, and that was easy. So relocated the radiator, put a new fuel pump, put a Walbro, whatever 255 LPH, like just a drop-in replacement fuel pump. You know, it'll get me 600 horse. You know, it's good for now. You know, that was easy. New fuel pump. For motor mounts, I've got Dirty Dingo LS S10. You know, motor mounts. They're S10 LS swap mounts and headers from Dirty Dingo. I gotta say, I recommend these specific motor mounts because they just work, man. Like it worked. You know, like it's a tight fit in here. Everything is tight. You know, from the headers, like the headers are so close to my steering shaft, but there's clearance. It works. In order to do the motor mounts, because the K member is it's hollow. And basically the motor mounts were bolted in, and then the K member was welded to the frame at the factory. There is like a small access hole where basically the A-arm mounts, but the only way you can get the motor mounts out and in is if I removed the upper control arm. I didn't want to do that, so I ended up cutting the old motor mounts out, and then where the holes were, so I cut the bolts off. So where the holes were, I took a angle grinder and cut little notches in each of the holes, fished a wire through down where the control arm hole is, looped it around a nut, pulled it up through my little notch, and tack welded the nuts in place. And I did that, so there's 3 on each side. I did that for all of them, tacked it, and then welded the nuts in there. So when I put the motor mounts in, I had something to bolt to. So I got, that was a challenge, but fortunately I have access to a welder. So motor mounts, I picked up a Turbo 400 transmission off of Facebook Marketplace for $200. I was so excited to get it for so cheap, and the fact that, you can just tell when you're buying something from somebody like that, you can tell that he's a straight shooter. That guy, yeah, that's a good tranny. I was so excited that I spaced the fact that it came out of a 1970 Pontiac GTO, and even though it's a GM transmission, the bell housing is different because it's a Pontiac. So I ended up having to get went to Transdat and it's just a adapter, it's just like it's a 0.3 of an inch thick, and I bolted to the motor, and then the tranny bolted to it, and yeah, that worked. I had to modify it a little bit. I had to bevel out a couple of the holes weren't big enough for the, what is it, not the timing cover, but the whatever. There's a couple bolts back there that, I guess it is the timing cover. No, the timing cover's right here. Anyway, I got that in there, but because the adapter is 0.3 of an inch, so now the transmission is 0.3 of an inch further away from the motor, so the flex plate and torque converter are 0.3 of an inch farther away from each other. So even with my the end play set on the torque converter, I had to eat that 0.3 of an inch. So what I did, I went to the hardware store and I just got nuts. I also bought the new bolts for, going through the flex plate into the torque converter. I don't remember exactly the size of the bolt, it doesn't matter. But so I got some nuts, and then I got my dial calipers and filed them down to where they were exactly 0.3 of an inch, perfectly all the way around them. So I basically put the bolts through the flex plate with the 0.3 nuts in between, and then bolted it. I had to go all the way around, and all the flex plate bolts. I don't remember. There's 3 or 4. I can't remember, and it worked perfectly. And after I did it, I checked the end play, and it's perfect, man. I've got 0 issues with that. I also I Loctited them in there, so you know, because I've replaced transmissions before, and I've had those bolts back out a little bit. And when I was driving it, I heard this ting, 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 ting. I thought I was blowing up my motor, but then I crawled under there, pulled that the tranny cover, the access cover off, and I saw one of the flex plate bolts had backed itself out. So anyway, I Loctited those in, and then, let's see, I put a new filter in the transmission, and a new pan gasket, and also in the tranny department, the flex plate that I got for this motor, it came out of a 4.8 liter that was bolted to a 4L80. It came out of the Express van. The reason I went with that flex plate, it's the flat flex plate, and also if you're going to bolt any LS engine to any older tranny, whether it's a TH350, TH400, 700 R4, any of the older style, you need a crank spacer. It's a glorified washer, but it's a machine part, and it just goes between the crank and the flex plate. So I got the flat style flex plate out of a 4.8 4L80 combo because it works perfectly on the Turbo 400 torque converter. I didn't have to oblong out the holes on the flex plate. I watched a lot of videos before I did this, and everybody had to do that, dude. Like, the holes are in the right spot, but they're not quite far enough apart. So they had to oblong them out and bolt it up to the torque converter, but I didn't have to do that. Honestly, I'm not sure if it's because it's the 4L80 4.8 flex plate, or if it's the BOP TH400. Anyway, it just bolted up, no problems. So let's see, I installed the engine and trans, and then I had to modify the cross member. I mean, multiple reasons. One reason is the TH400, the mount where it bolts to the cross member is a little bit further back. So you got the cross member, and there's a little tab on it that the tranny bolts to. So I cut that tab off. Obviously, I pulled the cross member out, bolted up the cross member, got into there, and then I checked my rear end angle. Now, if you guys don't know, these angles, it has to be parallel. Doesn't matter if it's like this. It really does. I mean, there's a certain amount of tolerance you're allowed, but if it's, sitting 5 degrees down, the rear end has to be 5 degrees up. You know what I mean? It's got to be equal, otherwise you'll pick up a vibration. You guys can check that stuff out. There's tons of resources online as far as that goes. So I checked that angle, and then I basically sat here and jacked up the motor until I got it at the exact right angle, then held up that little tab that I had cut off the cross member and tacked it in place, pulled the cross member out, welded it in real good, bolted it up, and rechecked the angle, and perfect. So, and I've been driving this all week, all this last week, zero issues. I installed a sidewinder shifter. I wanted a nice shifter, so I got a pretty nice one. I installed the Holley Terminator X management system, which dude, if you're gonna LS swap anything, I highly recommend the Holley. It takes so much of the headache out. I mean, the wiring harness, sure, it's $1,000. Dude, it replaces the wiring harness. You don't need the oxygen sensors. It comes with its own wideband O2, so it's constantly checking your air fuel ratio and making adjustments for you. The Holley will get you 90%. If you want a reliable vehicle, you've got to go in there and do you got to transfer your learn to your base tune and stuff. But, if you want it perfect. But the Holley, I cannot recommend it enough. Like, the wiring harness, I mean, look at this. It looks pretty good in here, I gotta say, plus the Holly comes with this handy little, it's got a little touch screen here. So I got all my stuff going on right here. You know, this guy, I gotta say, it is pretty sweet here. I mean, let's see if I go home. I mean, I can do all kinds of basic, advanced tuning. I mean, there's nitrous control, turbo, you know, everything in here, man. They're pretty awesome. Go back here. I don't want to change anything here. Advanced. Anyway, this thing's pretty awesome. And check it out. So, now that while I'm back here, it brings me to the rear end. I put a 8.8 rear end out of a 99 Ford Explorer. And after I put the rear end in there, the drive line was just a little bit too long. So what I did, I pulled the drive line out, and where the slip yoke, where it goes into the transmission, I cut about 3/4 of an inch off of it. And then I re-beveled it out, slid it back in there. Now I got plenty of room. But because I had a Ford rear end, I didn't want to re-drill it out. So I went and bought new wheels and new tires too. So I got some nice, big, meaty tires there. I got 30 inches tall and 10.5 inches wide. They're nice aluminum raceline wheels. And now I'm sitting at a little bit of a rake, but it's not bad. You know, it looks pretty good. But anyway, so what else have I done here? Let's check the list. I put a low profile air filter. My buddy hooked me up with this nice heavy duty coolant line. Let's see. Oh, my vacuum modulator on the transmission on the TH400, the original vacuum modulator. This guy right here is gigantic. I went to Napa and it was like $20 for. Well, I'm not going to show you because it's in there. Yeah, it's about this big. The problem was the original vacuum modulator was hitting my wideband O2 sensor, and yeah, so it was caught. They were in the way of each other. So I put the new one in there. And by the way, these Turbo 400 transmissions are pretty awesome, man, because like you pull the vacuum line off and you can turn that screw in a little bit, and then it controls how hard and soft it shifts. So I got her shifting a little bit more aggressively now. It chirps when I shift into second. Like I said, I've only been driving it a week straight, so I haven't really got any really good runs in yet. So we'll see how good it does. But I think that's about it. Yeah, LS swapping, it's a lot of work, but I'll tell you what, it's worth it, man. This thing is so much fun. It is just a blast, and they're cheap. I got this motor for $330, I think, from the wrecking yard. Dude, you know, I've got more in aftermarket parts than I do the motor and the truck together, you know. Dude, the cam was $250. You know, the valve springs were $100. You know, like, shit, I put a new water pump in it just for shits and giggles. That was $100, you know. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm running stock fuel line. I upgraded the fuel pump, and then I literally just tied into my my original fuel line. I'll point you down so you can see. Yeah, this is the original junkyard fuel filter. Like, literally. I just tied into it, you know, I double hose clamped everything. It's fine, no leaks, you know. I got a new fuel filter and stuff. I just haven't put it in yet. I don't need to, you know. Everything rips. Man, I got to say it's a kick in the pants, man. But I think that's about it, guys. So, see you guys later.